Let's do some math today. We're looking at statistics and probability with virtual manipulatives. And I hope that you will get something out of today's presentation. And I'm here with you again this week. My name is Leah Dix-White. I'm an RC for KCM. I'm enjoying the work. And here's a little about me I wanted to share. This is my daughter. Her name is Gabrielle. She's my only child. She's my baby girl. She's 21. And here are my other babies, my fur babies, Pablo and Zaza, which they're right at my feet. So if you hear dog noises, you know where they're coming from, those two slobber cats, bulldogs. And here's a snip picture from the high school that I taught at for years, like from the 2000s. And so that's my background. I taught high school math for about 15 years. And so I looked a little younger in that picture, I don't know, but anyways, and then I also have to give a shout out to the University of Louisville, where I received all of my degrees, and I'm really grateful for that. So just to give you a little bit about me. So if you are interested in looking at some of the great resources we have offered at KCM, you can check out our website. As always, there's a lot of cool things on there, so check it out. Today's session, we're going to look at the research. I'll talk about the standard, and then I'm going to share with you guys this cool online platform that I think is really great for statistics and for giving kids those visual representations we've been talking about over the sessions. We're going to do math together. We're going to look at what data tells us, what stories we can gather from the data, and I'll use some real-world context for that and give you some data sources, you know, for actual live real data that you can download. And then I'll also share with you some other resources I found with statistics and some other statistic stories that you could possibly share with your students that are appropriate for grades 13 and up. So that's our session for today. So let's move on to the research. I draw upon the Taking Actions text for 9 through 12 grades for the research quote here. And we really want to think about, you know, of course, implementing rich tasks that promote reasoning and problem solving, but also those visual models, those representations and drawings, and giving students opportunities with that before they move on to the formal methods and procedures. And so with the activity in mind for today, I'm going to look at some, and we're going to look at together some visual representations through a program that I think is really cool. And I think it's going to provide, or it can provide for students, visuals to draw upon that reasoning and problem solving that we want to happen when doing mathematics. And so let's look at the standard. We're going to be looking at statistics specifically. So although it's probably in statistics, our focus is on statistics. Interpreting differences in shape, center, and spread in the context of the distributions, and looking for those outliers. So really what we're doing, we're going to be looking at data. We're going to actually look at live data. That is the sample from population, and we're going to talk about what that data looks like, its shape, its center, its spread, and then talk about those measures of center that would help us tell the story. And so what I mean by measures of center, mean, median, mode, and you know, which of those measures tell the best story given the spread. We want our students to be able to tell whether it's skewed left or right, whether the spread is normal or whether it's symmetrical. So those are all the vocabulary terms we want to bring out when teaching this standard. The other thing I wanted to mention, obviously, were the student mathematical practices, which for this standard is making sense in problems and solving them and persevering in solving them, and also that looking for use and structure. And so that structure, when you're looking at the graphs, when you're looking at the data points, what are some uses you can see in that structure from those data points? And so we're gonna look at that together. Are we ready? So if you have already looked at the files and downloaded the CSV file, that's great. If not, that's okay. I'm going to go through the steps with you. First, I'm going to talk about the program a little bit before we go on to the task so that I can give you some information because it may be new. And so as I was looking for resources for today's activity and session, I stumbled upon this. I was like, this is so cool. So it's CODAP. It's an online data analysis platform. And if you're familiar with like software programs like this, it's kind of like Fathom. If anybody remembers Fathom. Fathom was like a statistics software that we used like in high school years ago. So that's what it reminds me of. But what's unique about it, it's free. Yay. You can import data files directly into it. And unlike Excel, you don't have to know like a programming language to manipulate the data. It's kind of like a drag and drop. And I'll show you that in a minute, which I think makes it very accessible for kids and easy to use. It's free, and you can save the files into Google and import into Google Classroom. So that's like the cool part about this software. So I'm gonna be working in it. And so I just wanted to give you some information and just give you some background on it, and the links are all embedded in the handouts. And as we go through, just if I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down, okay? All right, so here we go with our task. So what story does data tell us? And so as we have been in this quarantine situation, I know I have been obsessed with data. You know, how is the disease spreading, like we talked about in the first session? Who's getting tested? How do we know how many people are getting tested? And so in addition to my personal thirst for data, I also needed to look at some data for today's activity. So I stumbled upon the COVID tracking project, and I also cite that in this PowerPoint. But what's really cool about this website is that you can get data on anything revolving around the COVID project. And so that's where I got the data to do today's activity. And so I wanted to reference that for you. Another unique thing about this data site is that you can get specific state data, which was even more cool. So when providing opportunities for kids to explore and look at data, if you can get access to CVS files of real live stuff, that makes it even more exciting, and it gives a context for them to connect to when describing the shapes of the distributions. And so I was able to pull and download data directly from the site that gave me plenty of information to use in today's activity, such as, you know, how many deaths that have accumulated. And actually, this is from the 13th of April. So all of this data that you're seeing and what you're going to be seeing from today's activity, I downloaded a couple days ago, but the site updates daily. So I thought that was really cool. And so I downloaded the data and I pulled it for this activity. And so I'm going to be using this COVID data to address the learning standards. So are you ready? Because I'm about to switch to the online platform. Any questions before I jump really quick there?
No, I just want to give you a shout out about how cool it is that you're finding data. And this is really what statistics is about at high school. Grabbing the kids' attention with numbers that are topical, but doing, you know, the statistical content that really is necessary. I'm ready. I'm engaged.
All right. So this is what you would stumble upon if you clicked on the link for the initial like platform for CODAP. So you'd want to create a new document. And before I upload the data, I just want to kind of, you know, go over what you're looking at. This is just the basic screen. And I spent a lot of time playing along with this, but I promise you it's very user-friendly. So it's similar to me as GeoGebra and Desmos in that, you know, you have a graph feature, you have the slider, you have a calculator, although it's not a scientific calculator. You can add text. What's different about this program is that you can also look at maps and live maps, and I didn't do that for today, but I thought that was pretty cool for a cross-curricular connection. So anyways, to get started on looking at the data, the first thing you have to do is import it. So I'm going to go through that process with you. So if I were to import the data, you can do what's called a drag and click. And so if I were to import the data here, I've already downloaded it from the site in preparation for today's presentation, as you can see here. So I created in my desktop just some CVS files. And the cool thing about this program, it'll take any CVS or Excel as file. And so the file for today's activity is called US Current Data. And so I'm dropping it into the program just like that, a drag and click. And so what has happened now, I have an Excel spreadsheet here of all the data, and I'll talk about it a little bit before we start to analyze it. But what you have here is by state, a number of positive COVID tests, the grade each state would receive in their response to COVID, the scores the state would receive in their responses to COVID, negative tests. And so what I have here is just all this data that I downloaded from that COVID sheet that gives me information that I can use for today's activity. So I thought that was
What's
really
Kentucky's
cool.
grade? What's Kentucky's grade?
Kentucky actually has an A, which I thought was pretty cool. And so then we could totally use this to answer questions. And so if you have the handout, I know I had a handout attached to this activity. That's exactly what I've done. Step one, import the data. And so now we have our data into this program. So let me show you the cool things that we can do. We can create a graph, obviously. So when I click on graph here, we just get this basic picture, and then you click and drag whatever attribute you want to look at. And so what I thought would be cool is to look at the total test results. And so watch me just drag and click, boom. And here is the spread of total test results here.
Oh,
that have taken
wow.
place. And so what's unique about this visual is I can click on any data point and it'll take me to where that state is and give me all that information. And so from here, once you have your students get the data in here, you can have them answer all kinds of questions like describe the distribution. You know, what are the outliers? I bet you can infer what the outliers are if I were to click on that. Oh, that's New York City. Look how many positive test results they have here. That's how many tests they've given total. So with this, I think is really cool is that it makes it very dynamic for the kids to see the data. They can talk about the spread. Other things they can do is make inferences about which center measures would best explain or describe what's going on. So if this is a dot plot of all the cases of tests that have taken place in response to COVID, what would the center tell us? Would that tell us anything valuable? And how can we, you know, find the information out? So what's really cool about this program, it will calculate any of those for you. There's the mean, it'll do a count, it'll do a box plot, and you can focus on those values as well and have students talk about that and what it means in those values. So I thought that was really cool about this program as far as what it can offer for kids and their conversations. It'll show the quartiles and what that means. And since this spread isn't very symmetric, students can talk about why that is and what that means in the context of the situation. You can also remove outliers to tell a story. So if I highlight these 2 points here, which would be California and Florida, which they are runners up in having administered the most tests, I can click this hide button here and hide those points. I can also hide New York also, hide selected points. And now that can give me an even different story with my spread. As far as the picture. So I think once getting here and getting the, you know, files uploaded into the program, I think it can tell a powerful story. And kids can also engage in that story. They can add text here to their graph. They can save and import this into a Google Classroom. So they can play around and look at several different distributions. We can also make multiple graphs on this page if we wanted. And one more thing I wanted to show you that was really cool. We can, suppose if all these test results, we wanted to know which were positive or negative or what score that would be. So I can drag any attribute to the center here, and that'll show me the grade score for each state. So what you're looking at of all the test results, these are the scores they've gotten. And so just because you've given a lot of tests doesn't mean you got a high grade as far as your response. And then we even have some that aren't even graded. I don't know what those territories would represent. I can also click here and change that attribute to see, okay, let's look at the total deaths now. And so what it shows you for each state, it tells you the total test, but it also color codes how many deaths. So the lighter would indicate fewer deaths and the darker would indicate more. And so that tells another story with the data. So I think this program does a lot with colors and pictures as far as providing you to tell a neat story about that spread in terms of the data. So then students, you could have your students then respond about the spread. What story does this data tell? Is there another story or another picture you can compare and look at? And so they can do several graphs if you want it. And so
yeah, my head is thinking because I know that they're talking out there in the news with regards to some of the states that have low death rates, and what they're not telling us, they also have low testing rates.
yes.
And so there's an inverse, there's a correlation there. So what's interesting is to have a headline. So I could imagine them having a headline and then dropping this data in and investigating and saying, was this a fair headline for that state or was it an unfair headline? And I could be engaged, if I was a kid, I could be engaged in that for hours.
Right.
One of the things that's running here at the Kentucky Center for Math is slow. Let's slow things down and really give kids an opportunity to dive in and really understand the mathematics. Let's talk about mean, let's talk about mode. And Leah, what a dynamic what if program that you've just shown us that helps us to think about that. Again, fantastic.
Yes, so I thought it was really cool. You can even save images. So if a student plays around with here and you wanted them to find several different dot plots and compare them, they can take pictures and embed them. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And speaking of headlines, I'll talk about headlines more later because I have something else to share with y'all as far as a statistics resource. But before we get to that, so here are some reflection questions that you could have the kids respond to. Just talking about how those measures of central tendency, how they affect the graph, how they tell the story. You can have them make inferences about the graph. You can have them talk about the distribution and its symmetry. So those are all good reflection questions, and you can also use this as a springboard onto other things. And so what I was talking about with stories and statistics, what's really cool is that the New York Times has offered free prescriptions for all high schools through the year. So I thought that was really cool. And they offer on Wednesdays, it's called What's Going On in This Graph. And so I was like, I have to share this with my audience in this session because I thought it was so cool. So I snipped a picture from yesterday's story, and I just think, sorry about that. I think it's really cool to have our kids do this. And what they had was actually statisticians talking with kids about what they noticed in the graph. And so they had this picture and then they had a live feed and kids were responding, all grades, 13 and up. I think it means this. I think it means that. And so this is kind of an extension of the first session that we had, and we were talking about COVID spread and intervention. And so this was the graph from the other day, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. And I also wanted to click onto the New York Times and share with you their What's Going On in This Graph series. They have it every week. And so you could totally have your kids engage with other mathematicians and other kids around the country. They have a story. They'll show you a full-size image of the graphs and you can look at them. And so you could totally have your kids engage in that. And so I just wanted to share that. And even though these graphs are not necessarily distributions that we were talking about in the previous problem, they are graphs that kids could engage in great, rich conversations around. So I want to share that with you guys. Some things you can do with those graphs are the notice and wonders. And notice and wonders, we talk about those in the lower grades too. So these are questions that I got directly from the New York Times site, you know, how to spur kids to have these rich discussions about the graphs, gives them multiple entry points. They can, embark on those mathematical practices and develop those conceptual understandings that help them with the algorithms later. And so I wanted to share that with you. All right, so other data and statistics resources. There are tons of websites out there where you can get live and actual real world data. And so I stumbled upon several of those in preparation for today. It was one is the World Health Organization. They have tons of data in reference to COVID and other statistics that you may could tell stories about. There's this data story library. They have things you can just download, different topics, student heights, student birth weights, also obviously the COVID tracking project, which I used for today. And then also ASA has tons of K through 12 resources where I found this data game that was really cool. That you can look into, that it kind of has kids, make inferences about what they see. It's a manipulative that allows them to, kind of like the CODAP, that allows them to move things around and look at the different colors and pictures to develop those conceptual understandings. So I wanted you to have those as well. So I'll pause for a minute. Does anyone have any questions? Do you want me to go back to anything? Anything you want to share with the group as a whole? Anyone?
Yeah, I just wanted to say,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Julie.
my sister is a high school history teacher.
Yeah.
And she's always looking for ways to collaborate and do, project-based approach learning with other teachers. And so this just bounced right off in my mind that I can't wait to show her this, because this correlates with history and current events so much. And so you can look at what story does the data tell. I mean, there's so much out there in the news, and political parties are saying different things. And I just think this is an amazing way of looking at the data and saying, what story can you tell from this data? So it's a good way to not only collaborate as math, but add history in there as well, current events.
Definitely. There is a feature in that CODAP program where you can, if you put in like the coordinate values, the values of latitude and longitude, it will plot those points within the map. I just didn't have enough time to play around with that. I was like, I can get lost for days in this program. So.
Oh, that's neat to know too. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, it will do that. It will map sources in that way, so.
Mine was just to say that I could have cut 6 months out of my dissertation work if this had been available back in the day. Would have made my life a lot easier. But what I also like is you can do this, and this is very middle school friendly. So I'm just thinking in terms of multiple grade bands where you could use this, and obviously in adult ed. So that is very exciting.
Definitely. I wanted to see any comments in the chat. Okay. All right, guys, as always, you can check out any of these sources. They're all free. They're all accessible. I try to share things with you guys that you can get access to, because there's tons of stuff, but some of them had like Java requirements or certain programs, and that's not accessible to everyone. So all of these programs are, so the PhET simulations, Desmos, SkyDAC, CODAP, they are all accessible to you. I suggest you just get on and just play around with them. So thank you so much. We're probably early again. I have a tendency to do that just a few minutes early. But if anybody has any questions or feedback or any ideas you want to share, please, 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 please do. They're welcome. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I call that perfect timing, because that's exactly what it is. You always have just perfect timing. But the tech tools that you integrate into your sessions are off the chart. So I thank you so much for sharing those, because it allows the students, and our goal is to have students in Kentucky really engaged in the mathematics. And so you've given us a repository of places to go for that. So fantastic. As always, we give Leah feedback. So what are some of the things that you enjoyed about her session today? Go ahead and unmute your mic and give her some of the good warm feedback.
Well, I can't wait to get off here so I can go ahead and call people to share this resource that aren't on here, so they can go back and look at all these ways, different ways to make the graph and the different attributes that you can highlight.
So cool. I'm going to love that. She's going to be dangerous with it, and I love it.
Yeah.
And they have little tutorials that you can download and practice. Like I did several of those so I can feel comfortable with it. It's just like anything new, you gotta play around with it, but it really was user-friendly. I think kids and teachers would find it user-friendly, so.
That's good to know too. I'm engaged myself, so I wanna get in there, and I can't wait to play with it myself and see what information, see what story I can glean from the info.
Yeah, I opened up the CODAP site, and I see that there are some ready to use. There was a roller coaster and some other ones in there. And so I can think that that's a good way to dip your toe in the water,
Right.
have kids to be able to do that. So I encourage you to open it, because you were doing yours, I was multitasking in mine. That was so much fun. Well, as always, we thank you for joining the Kentucky Center for Mathematics for our Zoom sessions. Thank you to Leah Dix-White for sharing her knowledge today. Thank you, guys. We'll see you.